Ah, oh. Hi everyone, welcome to this month's DBA Fundamentals Virtual Group webinar. This is Linux for the SQL Administrator, kindly presented by David Klee. My name is Shane O'Neill. I will be a moderator today. If there's any questions or comments, don't be afraid to throw them into the questions bar and we'll try and get them over to David. Now, just to thank our sponsors who are SQL Century One. These guys do a lot for the community, which includes SQLperformance.com. They have webinars, downloads, services. They do a lot for the community. Please don't be afraid to check them out and get in touch with them. Virtual Group News. We still have the discount code for Past Summit, which is on this year from the end of October to the start of November. It is probably the meetup for SQL Server professionals and data professionals, so we really encourage you to go check it out. We have heard that people say that that is where their careers were met. Like I said, it is on 31st of October to the 3rd of November in Seattle, Washington, and that is our discount code VC15GBQ6. Coming up, we've got lots of things, virtual group meetings from Kendra Little to Mike West, S is my shortcuts to DBA to data scientists. We've got Jennifer McCown, Andy Mallon, Edwin Sarmiento. We have lots of things come up to you, so please keep on the lookout for them. We will spread the registration links around on Twitter and on our email newsletter. Past gives you so many different virtual groups, and every single one of them has so much to offer, and we encourage you to get involved as much as you can. We've got data science, we've got high availability and disaster recovery, we've got PowerShell, we've got performance. Check any of them out. They all should be free, and all you need is a past registration. And finally, we have SQL Saturdays. These are the mini summits. These are where presenters give talks. This is free training for you guys. All you have to do is find where you like and sign up. And with that, the final thing I'll say is we do try and get these presentations up as quick as we can after the session. So don't be afraid to check out our YouTube channel, which is at dbafundtube.org, and we will try and get the slides up, David, afterwards if he's willing to let us have them, and we'll put them up on the sessions panel. Absolutely. So with that, I'm all done, and it's over to you, David. I'll just make you presenter, and you should be good to go.
Perfect.
And there you go.
Okay, can you see my screen okay?
I can see it perfectly.
Perfect. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is Underwater Basket Weaving 101. Now, this is actually SQL Server Administration on Linux. And I know that whole Linux phrase out there, that's just weird. I never ever thought that this day would come, to be honest. A little bit about me. My name is David Klee. I am a certified nerd. What else can I say? I am a geek. I'm lucky enough to be a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and a VMware vExpert. I have a whole lot of fun. I actually started my own company 4 years ago to really focus on how data and infrastructure come together. And honestly, this change in Microsoft, this directional change, it's been really fascinating for us. So a little bit about me. A lot of folks know me as kind of an infrastructure DBA, but my roots are a little more unique, put it that way. This is me from way back in the day with the whole SQL high school photos from a while back. That was me. I don't know if anybody noticed this when I published this online about 6 months ago, but you notice I'm wearing a VA Linux t-shirt. And that's not just because I got it for free, it's actually because I was an active user of them at the time. It's kind of interesting. I was compiling Slackware kernels in the 5th grade. I was a system administrator and Unix geek first, and then learned Windows, and then became a SQL Server DBA. So now that SQL Server is really aggressively going after the Linux platform, I feel at home. It's really cool. This is an incredible seismic shift coming from Microsoft. I don't know if you know, SQL Server was actually a joint project with Sybase, and the original version was based off of OS/2. Microsoft actually got the fork to go to the Windows platform. I don't know if anybody remembers this from a while back. Steve Ballmer actually called Linux a cancer. He was referring to open source, and he kept saying that everything that goes on an open source platform has to eventually become open source, and that's not necessarily the truth. Well, times change. Last year, Microsoft published the HD Insight package, which is essentially Hadoop, but it runs on Linux. This is by Microsoft for Linux. It's an incredible shift, and I saw this and kind of did an about take. Like, what is going on? This is really, really interesting. Microsoft is a dramatically different company today, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody running the show, but the directional shift to really embrace the community and embrace the technology that people want to use and actually roll with it, it's incredible. It makes me incredibly happy to continue to be part of the Microsoft ecosystem, more now than ever, to be honest. This is just the beginning. I really feel like if you look at the way things are going, you got HD Insight, now you got SQL Server on Linux. I really believe that, I hope they're working on a lot of these other packages, and if not running the other platforms that they've got on different operating systems, at least run some of the applications on them. Well, one, why Linux? I mean, isn't it just a geeky little penguin bouncing around? Well, you got to appeal to more audiences. You really do. They basically want to deliver a consistent database platform. They want you to be able to develop this thing anywhere, regardless of the operating system. And if you look at modern operating systems today, the big ones in play are going to be Windows, and there's Mac OS X. Now there's a handful of people out on Linux. If you look at OS X versus Linux, they're actually similar under the hood. So if we can make it work for one, we can make it work for the other, and we can really tackle the biggest, broadest stretches of users out there with one big upgrade. They really want to tackle folks that are interested in getting to a SQL Server platform and getting off of some other DBMS platform, Oracle, but they want to stay on the same operating system. A lot of these folks are really used to dealing with Red Hat Linux, maybe Oracle Linux, any of these Linux variants that these folks are used to. It is another jab at Oracle. I'll just flat out say it. SQL Server is as scalable as Oracle now. Why not migrate to it? It's a great way to stay on the same base platform. Another thing, a lot of the big push in the industry, virtualization was there 5, 7, 10 years ago. Containers are there now, where you can basically package an entire application and just shift it. You don't need to worry about the operating system. Well, if we can tackle Linux, we can tackle Docker at the same time and make this work on containers, and we can essentially have an entire application that we can package and now push regardless of OS. It's cool. Plus, Linux is an awesome cloud platform. It's got really small resource consumption with it. It's got a very small footprint in terms of disk consumption, and it can save you a lot of resources if you want to run these things at scale. And we see a lot of cloud platforms out there. It's really the prevalent cloud operating system out there. So target platforms, the things that we really need to focus on. Red Hat Linux, big one, which by variant, it means we also get CentOS. That's kind of the community edition. Red Hat Enterprise Linux you got to pay for. CentOS is free. Same thing with SUSE. SUSE Enterprise Linux works really, really well. There's also Ubuntu Linux. There's also Docker. Now that's the container platform that they selected. It's arguably the biggest one out there. By extension, Docker also works on Windows. So if you need to package a dev environment and be able to ship a copy to somebody, you can now ship all the dependencies at once as part of that Docker container solution. By extension, it also works on Macs. So now all the developers out all over the place that are on Macs, they can now run SQL Server natively. And with the shift in development tooling and the development platforms, you now have a complete development solution that really can run anywhere. So how'd they do it? Well, obviously, they chose to rewrite 70+ million lines of code, right? No. That would be foolish at this point. It's really an interesting scenario behind this. What they did a long time ago, they made this decision that they wanted to have their own hooks into the hardware underneath, whatever platform that they're on. Windows itself had things like delayed consistency of disk, all these other things that could have broken the experience, and it could have broken the ACID properties of the good relational database engine that it is. So they elected to write their own abstraction layer to abstract away a lot of the operating system calls that most people make, like memory management, CPU queuing and threading, stuff like that. And they wrote their own because they wanted to be able to control it and make sure that it really met their own standards. Interesting thing there, we've got this package called Drawbridge, kind of an updated version of it in the SQL OS. These are the things that make up the SQL platform. I'll talk more about that here in a second. The SQL Server operating system, this is what we know. This is the thing that does memory management with the buffer pool. These are the things that actually talk to disk and I/O and synchronization and threading and monitoring and resource governance and all the stuff that we use today. It's basically a mini operating system in itself. Well, if you take that and now this package called Drawbridge, these are all the things that Windows normally manages, application threading, getting to disk, dealing with all the normal stuff. They abstracted all this away through the platform abstraction layer. And at the end of the day, they actually only had 45 calls through that were actually dependent on the Windows operating system. So it's interesting. So what they ended up doing was to merge the two into the SQL Server Platform abstraction layer. Get the OS in there, get all these direct calls and anything that they could possibly link in there, and then just rewrite the hardware abstraction layer for a different platform. They didn't have that many calls to rewrite. It's the exact same code. This is not a fork of the code base. This is the SQL Server binaries. And it just works in multiple places. It's really phenomenally cool. So arguably, because of the work that they did a while back with this abstraction layer, something that seemed like it would be one of the hardest things to port to another operating system is arguably one of the simplest ones. Now I know there's an incredible amount of work from them to make this happen because there's a lot of hard-coded things in there. But fundamentally, it was one of the easier things they could have done. And now they've got this thing running all over the place. So the supported features is actually now as of RC2. The feature list didn't change. Core engine functionality is working. So backup restore, DMVs, SQL agent is working. It doesn't give you XP command shell because that doesn't exist, but you still get basic functionality with it. All the in-memory stuff works. You get high availability. And this is some interesting stuff. And if you've ever talked with Alan Hurt, he's going to be demoing a lot of this kind of stuff over at the PASS Summit this year. So you do get failover clustering. You do get availability groups. Now, it's not with the Windows layer that we're familiar with. It actually leverages some Linux components called Pacemaker. You do get replication. You do get log shipping. Security standpoint, as of RC1, they actually have Active Directory authentication in there. You get TLS. You get always encrypted, TDE, CDC. You get Service Broker. New as in CTP 2.1, you get SSIS, and you get R. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. That is a lot of stuff. Current unsupported features, SQL Server Analytics Services, XP Command Shell, any CLR assemblies that are used with external access or unsafe permissions on them, and be careful with those. Replication, file table, stretch DB, all the stuff that you see here. And anything dealing with high availability, you must fail over directly. It's a manual operation. It's not automatic at this point. They're saying that all this is going to be working by the time we get to production, whenever that is. But I mean, it's a heck of a list that they've got working so far. Performance. This is a big one that I get hit up with a lot. It's the same code. So why wouldn't it perform? My testing under a lot of things, and we are live with this in production today for a couple things that we're doing. My testing shows that on average we're at 85% to, in some cases, above 100% of base performance. Think about that. That's incredible. To essentially have a platform that's been on Windows for 25, 30 years, to turn around and get it running on a foreign platform and have it work better than native with an equivalently sized VM. That's incredible. And with every RC, every CTP that's been coming out, it's just been getting better and better and better. So again, you know, RTM is not out yet. We don't know where they're going to stand there. I'm assuming it's just going to be better and better. Okay, GUI or command line. Now, if we had the time, I would take a poll. You know, if we were in a class, that everybody raise their hands. How many of you are on Windows Core? And usually in a room of 50 people, I'm going to have one person in the back corner kind of half raise their hand and then say maybe. Most of the time, we're all on basic Windows that we've been on for years, Windows GUI. Well, Linux, you can get a GUI or you can get a command prompt. Well, unfortunately, that's what it looks like from the GUI. You get tons of functionality in there, you just have to know where to go and what to do. Well, if you want a GUI, you're welcome. You get a transparent terminal session. Just about everything you need to do is in the console here. So most of the time when I install this as a server-based OS. I don't need a GUI. You don't need it. Everything that you do is going to be like this anyway, except maybe some text editing. You know, so if you like the pretty transparent one, and I do, don't get me wrong, but you don't need it. Okay, command line syntax is one that, you know, we got to go back to some roots here. Command line stuff, now if you've been doing PowerShell, a lot of this stuff will be familiar because they actually borrowed some of the syntax from Linux. These are a lot of the commands that you're going to need when it comes time to do this in production. So directory list in Windows, it's dir. In Linux, it's ls. Change directory, cd. Make directory, make dir, rm dir. Delete is rm instead of del. Cat instead of type to display file contents. Copy, move, rename. The biggest thing here is run as elevated, and I'll explain that more in just a minute. Find a string in a file is grep instead of find. Change file attributes is change mod. Change group to change group attributes and ownership. Elevated privileges, we've all seen this. You know, give me the permissions to go make this change, blah, blah, blah. Well, in Linux, you get the same thing. It's the concept of running as root. It's kind of like running something as SA inside SQL Server. I mean, this is your deity account that gives you global access to do whatever you want. You got to be very careful with this. It's kind of like saying, you know, I'm going to run as a regular account, and I'm going to switch to my elevated account only when I need to make a major system change. Now, the way to do it, you can actually log in as root to some of these operating systems. I don't recommend it. What I do like to do is use the sudo. It's super user do a command. And with that, now I can turn around and say, well, I want to use elevated permissions and do this one command. And that way I can be very careful to only run the stuff that I need with elevated permissions that way. So if I try to do this, for example, an apt-get update, it's kind of like a version of Windows Update on here. If I don't do this with elevated permissions, it just goes, yeah, I can't get a lock on all this stuff. Are you root? Now, not all of them are as pretty and clean as a message as this, but, you know, take it for what it is. If we can't do something as a regular command, we might need to jump to root. That's what happens when you run it with root. So just sudo and then your command. Now, it's going to ask for your password in here. It may make sense for you to type this in. You know, you may want to change over to root if you're doing big updates, whatever you want to do. But at that point, it works. Now, unfortunately, this is one of my favorite comics. This does not work in real life if they don't know the joke. Sudo, make me a sandwich. Wish that would work. That is from one of my favorite comics, XKCD. If you've not gone there, don't go during the working day because you will spend the rest of your day looking through all the comics and not actually getting work done. But do go there as soon as you can. Okay. File system structure is also very interesting. Now, I don't know who at Microsoft back in the day came up with A, B, C, D, those drive letters, because to me, you run out because you're limited to 26. And, you know, if you ever want to watch somebody freak out, assign a SQL Server backup drive to the A drive. And you can do this, and it works, but it's really weird. It's kind of like assigning a VM with 5 CPUs. You're going to get somebody's head to spin before they realize what's going on. But the difference here is that the Linux file system is based on a tree. not necessarily arbitrary drive letters. Now, everything is based off of slash. That's the root mount point. That's where everything mounts off of. There is no real equivalent inside Windows outside of going to My Computer to see all the drives listed. Now, the C drive user's username, that's now under /home/username. This is basically your stuff. C drive Windows, it's kind of broken out here between /bin for binaries and /sbin for system binaries. Windows temp, you now have a /tmp folder, and you'll know if I built one of your SQL servers because the C drive has a /tmp folder on it. Just legacy stuff that I've just done for years. C drive program files, this is where end users get to install their applications. So /opt /user bin or user local. Basically, if it's add-on stuff that you're adding from not one of the base repositories, you can park it in opt. The stuff that you get from some of the built-in repositories usually goes under user bin or user local. Libraries, source code, binaries, things like that usually goes under just /user. And your system logs, whereas in Windows, they're kind of scattered all over the place, between the event log and different application logs. The Linux standard there is everything under /var and usually /var/log. You can find all kinds of good stuff there. The SQL Server instance home is /var/opt/mssql. And as of RC1, you are not able to change this. I'm hoping they fix this as of RTM. We'll see. Okay, default server placement. When you do an install, /var/opt/mssql, and then under MSSQL, it's basically like looking at the instance home. You've got data, you got logs, you got some tools, but this is what you get under data: master, model, MSDB, tempDB, just like we've always seen. Package managers, if you want to install SQL Server, this is the easiest way. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to take Windows Update, but I'm going to add a Microsoft repository where I can just point and click my way, or basically type and just say, go get it. I don't care where you get it from, just go get it. So in this case, this is a screenshot off of one of the Ubuntu Debian-based platforms, sudo apt-get upgrade. That's basically a Windows Update right there. Now, if there's a SQL Server update in here, sudo apt-get upgrade, and right there you can see this lets you go get updates to SQL Server. Now again, don't do this in the middle of the day, do this in the maintenance window just like you always would, but it's that simple. Now, if these machines do not have internet access, and it happens, you can actually download this from packages.microsoft.com as a package format that's compatible with your operating system and actually do an in-place upgrade that way, and you can do it offline. Okay, so let's get into some of the nuts and bolts on the things that actually matter. If I go do a base installation of SQL Server on Windows and all I've got is a C drive, everything gets dumped on the C drive, and that's really bad for performance. It's really bad for management. Same thing happens in Linux. It's not that big of a jump. So what do? I want to map drives. First of all, I need to back up over the network. I need to map local drives. First thing we're going to do, back up to the network. Biggest thing, and I've got a blog post series that goes into detail on how to actually do these installs, so I'll gloss over the how and talk about the what. Essentially, I need to install the Common Internet File System utils package. It basically allows this machine to talk to a Windows or, conversely, a Linux share. And if you've got an NFS-based file server, you can also mount that as an NFS package and do the same sort of backup. You create a path that you want to mount this drive at, kind of like saying I want to go mount that drive on a Windows share onto another drive. And then you create an entry in this thing called the File System Table, or etc/fs tab. I'll do a little bit of drawing on the screen here. So basically, that's the file right there. And again, all this is listed in those blog posts. But all we need to do is say, I want to back up this thing to that network share. Now, this could be a Windows share, Linux share, whatever you're normally doing today. I'm going to mount this as /media/ some folder name that you create. CIFS, Common Internet File Systems, completely compatible with SMB. Credentials. Now again, you don't want Windows-based service account credentials to be stored in plain text, so I can put them in my home directory and secure them, so only this process or anybody else with root privileges can go see it. IO character set UTF-8, and then right there, security NTLM. So it will actually do proper Active Directory authentication. It's pretty cool. Now, if this is a wide open backup share, which I really don't recommend, you can use this previous command up here to mount as guest. I don't recommend that you have these things offline unless that is a completely segregated network and only these SQL servers can get to it, and even then I still probably wouldn't even do it. So normal security applies here. And then all you do is once you get that in there, just sudo mount path to the share and then just back it up like normal. Now, additional disks. I'm going to take a VM. I want to have a drive for data, a drive for logs, a drive for tempdb, maybe more than one of each, depending on how big I need this thing to scale. So manage it just like another VM. Add more disks. With that, add entries in my FS tab. Basically, if you go here, and again, there's a blog post that lists the whole thing, /dev for device, SDA is that drive, SDB is another drive, SDC is another drive. 1 means the first partition on each of those, and I'm going to mount them. var opt MS SQL data is a base install path for all this stuff, and I'm just going to make them data disk, log disk, tempdb disk. I'm going to format these as ext4. You can also format in the XFS file system if your operating system supports it, and all the ones listed do. So with that, you can really pick the one that you like. I'm partial to ext4 because it's solid, it works, but both have their advantages. If there is a problem mounting these things, I still want to be able to get to them in a read-only manner, so I'm going to mount these things as read-only. Now the 0.1, it basically means if I'm going to mount these things, I'm going to give priority to the OS drive before these. Done. And then with that, let's go see what we've got here. So this command right here, lsblock, lsblk, it's list block devices, and I'm going to say give me the name, the file system type, size, mount point, and label. And this particular machine, it went a little bit out of order, but it's okay. SDE is the boot drive, SDA, SDC, SDB, and STD at some point in here. Those are all built in for me to go mount these things. So you can go verify what you've got. You can see the file system type, if there's any partitions on there, and where that partition is mounted. To make this work, you have to change the ownership. Linux is really locked down and secure. Windows is getting there. It used to be wide open, then you would secure it, and that's kind of a challenge. In this case, even though you mount those folders, SQL Server still can't get to them. So chown, kind of a weird command. It's basically change ownership. -R is recursive. mssql.mssql means MSSQL user and the MSSQL group now have access to that folder. So if we do this right, we can now get to it. And now this is what you see, data disk, log disk, tempdb. So it's real similar to what we would do in Windows. It's just a little bit of a change to go set it up, but we don't have to really manage it that much differently. Now, to install SQL Server, the docs are right here. It is really straightforward to go install this. You add a repository location into your repository manager in the machine. The docs tell you exactly how to do this, and honestly, you can point and click your way through doing this. Do that right, and that gets you set up. It is as simple as, for Red Hat, sudo yum install -y mssql-server. And now you're up and running. And you can do this with MS SQL Server Agent. You can do this with SSIS. You can do this with full text searching. It's simple, and the solutions there, the documentation is actually really good. Okay, now let me show you this. Now, if you notice, this is what I got when I turned on my VM today. I upgraded to RC2 last night on this thing, and everything was working great there. I rebooted the machine a couple of times, and now I'm getting a core dump, so I'm not quite sure what's going on, so I'm going to dig into that later on and report that. But I've got a backup. This is in my lab. This is Linux. Yeah, I know. That's really exciting, isn't it? But functionally, this is what you see when you're managing SQL Server. It's SQL Server Management Studio. it looks, it smells the same. If you go select at version, if you look, that is SQL Server Developer Edition on Ubuntu Linux. How crazy is that? It's awesome. You know, pick a task in here, right click, hit properties. You know, I can see this VM has got 4 CPUs, 12 gigs of RAM, memory settings, you know, plain installation, you've got NUMA, you've got all the normal stuff. Database settings. Now if you notice, the default database settings cannot be changed at this point in time. No big deal. When you create the database, you know, just move them to wherever you need. But again, a big difference here. We're not based on C drive, E drive, you know, Z drive anymore. It's now /var opt MS SQL data. All the advanced stuff, perfectly fine. And they've actually fixed that in RC2. There used to be something here that had a base path on C drive. But all the base stuff works. I mean, this is a TPCC database from the HammerDB benchmark that I backed up on a Windows machine and restored it over here. I'll let that pop up. And you can see, I mean, it's just a regular SQL Server database. Here's my files, here's my file group, here are my options. You know, it's the same. And I can show you here, if I go on this particular VM, and I'll zoom in here in just a moment, so if you go /mount, right there, that is a SQL Server backup location. If I could type right today. So I've got right there. That's where I backed it up to, and I actually restored it from that location and then backed it up again on that location. Nice and straightforward. Now this particular machine, so if we go, actually we'll just do so simple command sudo cat, so basically list the contents of the file /etc fs tab. So right there, all of this stuff up here, this is basically related to the bootable operations on this machine. We don't really want to touch any of that. You run the risk of breaking the ability for this thing to boot. Now, this stuff right here, this was part of the blog post series. I actually used the logical file manager, it's called LVM, Logical Volume Manager, to actually go expand these drives. I formatted these as XFS because I wanted to go play and see what kind of a difference there was. Didn't really find anything. But I mounted these things, var opt MS SQL data tempdb data log. These are a couple of the commands that you need to use, but basically by doing this with the Logical Volume Manager, I'm now able to expand the virtual disk if I'm short on log space or something, and then grow the drive transparently. And it can do this while the VM is hot, just like Windows can. Again, follow that blog post for the specifics on there to walk you exactly through how to go set it. And then with the backups, this is a Synology NAS in my lab. Backup DB SQL Linux Ubuntu. I'm going to mount this as /mount/Synology DB Backup 01. Sys. There's that credentials file. Security is NTLM, and mount it. Nice and straightforward. So if we go under, and I'm going to, so I am root right now, so if I go var opt MS SQL, if I could type. So now that's my SQL Server base install data. MS SQL conf, secrets, system, data log. And right now, MS SQL conf is kind of funny. It basically says, I've accepted the end user agreement because lawyers trump everything. And I've got my network, and I was experimenting with getting Active Directory authentication working in here. And since I'm remote, since that other thing failed, right now I'm off my network, and that's going to be kind of a challenge. But it does work. It really does work. So if I go to log, actually do it that way. So you can see all the normal stuff in the SQL Server log folder. You know, I got error logs. I'm cycling those. I've got a bunch of different log files in here, a bunch of different extended events. I've got a default trace file. You know, I've got SQL agent output, SQL agent startup output, you know, different log files. It's just like Windows. And if I go data, this is where I've actually been mounting this other stuff. So I left the system files alone, master model, MSDB. TempDB, I moved to another folder, and you can see ownership is set correctly. It's readable and writable only by who needs it, and then data, and then log. So if I go data 01, there's my database, tpcc.mdf. And if I go log, there's my log file. If I go tempdb, there's my tempdb data files, and the log file. I mean, this is the normal stuff that you would do with really any production system. Why not do that here? You get better performance, you get better scalability, it's a little bit easier to manage. All the stuff directly applies. Now, when it comes to maintenance, you do get the SQL Server agent. You do not get, right now, the ability to run XP command shell. So you'll have to make some minor modifications if you're leveraging that to move data around, or some of the backup and maintenance solutions out there. But it doesn't take much to go modify it. Right now, I don't believe email is working here. I could be wrong on that. Availability groups are they're there. You have to use something called Linux Pacemaker. But a lot of the stuff just works, and it's an incredible time. I never ever thought I'd be able to see that day. Cool. Okay, so to me, conclusions here, and then we'll open this up to questions because I know we'll have a lot. This is not just a port of a program to another platform. To me, this is a symbol. This is a symbol that the new Microsoft is here. They're open. They're willing to work with other people. They're willing to play nice. They're willing to contribute to the community. I mean, they're platinum members of the Linux Foundation now. It's an incredible time. It makes me really happy to be in the Microsoft ecosystem. And I think, I want to say you may not be interested in this from a production standpoint. If you're not ready to administer a Linux machine, that's okay. But for a dev environment, for providing, mobile development platforms for some of your developers if they travel around, for cutting costs when it comes to pre-production environments or even hosted environments, this really is a good alternative. If you need base functionality and you need it to just work, it's a solid platform. So with that, we'll open this up to questions.
Hi, David.
Hi.
I was actually just thinking when you said you never thought you'd see this day. I remember Steve Jones had a blog post for April's Fools about SQL Server going to Linux a while back.
Yeah, I mean, we all thought it was a joke. We all joked about it. I kept joking about running SQL Server on my Android phone. We'll see.
We have a couple of people here just wondering if you could show the slide with the unsupported features again. They just want to get a picture of that.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, everybody, the slides here, these will be posted. I'll send those over here shortly. So the unsupported features, now this was as of RC1. They didn't really have any release notes, that substantial notes that went along with RC2, so I'm going to assume these are really close to the same.
Okay. Lovely. Okay, someone's asking if Kerberos authentication is needed as well, or is available, I guess.
Right now, to be determined.
Okay. Okay.
And my assumption is that's a pretty important piece. I'm hoping that that'll be ready for RTM.
I'd say a few people are actually. We have a couple of people asking for the link to your blog site and contact information, because you mentioned you were going to put up a blog about that.
Yeah, real easy, just my name, davidklee.net. And basically, if you do a quick search, you'll find there's a whole string of posts here. So there's a big one, backing up over the network, moving tempdb, let's see, adding the additional drives, the core differences in the operating system, a lot of stuff that we talked through. The additional drives is really going to be the big one here. But it's a full walkthrough, how to add the drives, how to go in and add them, how to go see what you've actually created to make sure everything looks okay. The logical volume manager is arguably one of the bigger changes in here because it's not really intuitive. You actually have to go in and create some of these volumes manually, but there's a whole walkthrough in here. By doing that, one of the other, I'm about half done with the blog post, is basically, now you got the drives, what if you're running short on space? How do you grow one of these things? So that'll be up soon, and then another post will be how to manage your database maintenance solution now that you're on the Linux platform.
Okay, okay. There are a couple of people asking about HADR options running SQL Server on Linux. Oh, wow, when you said open the questions, they're literally flooding in now.
Cool. Yeah, we got plenty of time. I always leave a good amount of time for questions on this one. In terms of HADR, right now, failover clustering works. You do need to use potentially in-guest iSCSI to make this happen so it knows how to fail over and back. And it uses something called Linux pacemaker to actually act as the failover cluster heartbeat and quorum mechanism. It does work. There are really good directions on Microsoft's website for basically just copy and paste and get that in there and make it work. I've tested it both on CentOS and on Ubuntu, and the directions are perfect for both of those. Now, availability groups also do work. Right now, it is essentially certificate-based, and there's an add-on that also depends on pacemaker to deal with, who's primary, who's secondary, and quorum. But it does work. It's right now Active Directory I don't believe is in there. That may have changed with RC1 or 2, but it is coming along, and they claim that it'll be up and running and available for RTM. Now again, managing it will be the same. Setting it up will be a little bit different. Again, you got to go deal with all that other stuff to get the Linux side up, but it does work. Right now, mirroring does not work. Log shipping does work, and I don't believe replication works.
Okay. Let's see. Can we use Veritas cluster instead of pacemaker, or will it only work on pacemaker?
That's a really good question. I would pose that via Twitter or email, but Twitter you probably get a better response. I would actually pose that to the Microsoft product team. I don't know. I don't know if they would support that right now or not. I mean, it seems like a logical extension, but I think they're trying to go with stuff that's built into the OS first.
Okay. Do you have a blog about adding Ubuntu to AD and set up pacemaker?
Not yet, but it's on the list.
I say you get a lot of blog post ideas from these presentations as well.
Oh, absolutely. I've actually got a notepad sitting next to me, taking stuff down as I give this.
Let's see. Is there load balancing in Azure? That's a very short question.
Yes. Short answer. Yeah, I mean, basically, if you can do the load balancing from an AG side, provided you can deal with the failover portion of this, which right now is manual, then the load balancing would work just fine.
Okay, here's a question. Well, I suppose there's a kind of opinion question and a fact question. Can a Windows DBA realistically expect to become proficient at administrating SQL Server on Linux? And what resources would you recommend for that?
The answer is yes, because realistically, there's not that much that you have to worry about. It's not like we need to go in and recompile the kernels or deal with thousands of comp files. Microsoft, with the way that they've packaged this, it's pretty darn straightforward. So I would claim that you can get in there and you can go learn this, and all it's going to take is just a little bit of trial and error. And from a learning standpoint, the single best thing that you can do is go get a copy of Hyper-V or VirtualBox or VMware Workstation, whatever works better for you, and install a copy of one of those flavors of Linux, and just go install it, go play with it, and say, based on one of your dev environments, how much of that can you replicate on there? How much of it can you not? You may have some application hooks on the machine. There may be stuff that relies on XP command shell. There are differences, definitely. But you're going to be surprised that most of the stuff that you do, the only thing that you have to do is change syntax from, a backslash to a forward slash on drive paths, and that's really about it.
Okay. Okay. Here's one for you. If we forget the SA password, is there any other way to get into SQL on Linux?
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
Very good size, very specific, yeah.
Is there any other way to get into SQL on Linux without the SA password? Well, once you get Windows authentication set up, you don't have to worry about that, and it does work. I would go that far. I don't know of any backdoors in there to go unlock this right now. That is a good question, though. I'm gonna pose that to our security folks and see what we can do with that.
Okay. No,
That'd be a fun blog post.
Two people have asked. You mentioned, I think in one of your earlier slides, that there's like an 85 to 100+% performance benefits on Linux.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of want to know, like, where do you get that estimate from, or do you have examples of performance benefits?
Yeah. I mean, the examples came from a whole bunch of testing that we did with a number of workloads that we dropped on there, and I can give you the details on it. One of them, synthetic workloads. We did both with the HammerDB and the DVD Store SQL Server benchmarking tools, and those were between 85 and 90%. They were really good. There's a perfmon database that we've got that's got, when we stopped testing it on this platform, we were at 61 billion data points on there. We were leveraging column store indexing. And with the way column store indexing works, it's a whole lot of access to a lot of small 1 million row blobs, basically. Linux is really, really good about doing lots of little tasks with small segments of files, whereas Windows is really good with big monolithic applications. So in the stuff that deals with a lot of concurrent activity, namely really big column store queries, we actually found a little bit better performance on Linux than we did on Windows, just a little bit. We've also tested in memory, and that's roughly equivalent. It was about 90–95%, and that was actually with a custom script that we wrote, just synthetic junk, and actually HammerDB has got an in-memory flag now when you go construct the workload database.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's fair enough. You're definitely doing your testing then. If we query sysdmos performance counters, we get counters for Windows. Does that mean that it's querying the corresponding Linux counters part?
Not right now.
Not right now.
Yeah, right now that does not work. I have tested that because I've been trying to figure out how to monitor this. There was a really good blog post from the SQL Cat team from about 3 to 4 weeks ago about how they actively monitor performance consumption on a Linux machine. So I would definitely suggest you go check that out. That is on our list for a future blog post. I'm just trying to find a straightforward methodology to get the equivalent of Windows perfmon counters. That is definitely a big change with that one.
Okay. Do you think would they kind of work the Linux in with the current Windows OS counters, or do you think they'd have separate ones?
It's going to be separate names. I actually don't know how they would do that. I don't want to speculate for them. I think they could come up with a very similar mechanism to go get to them, but it's exposed differently, and the application itself may not even have the permissions to go see that level of data because of how locked down it is. So I don't know. I'm going to do more research, and if I can get a definitive answer, I'll definitely have something out on the blog post, because performance monitoring, short of availability, is about the two most important things that we can do here.
Okay. We got a question on how does SQL 2017 and Linux and Hadoop, can they be deployed together, or do they work?
Well, I mean, if Hadoop can talk to a SQL server via a regular database connection, then yeah, they could be deployed, no problem. If I'd put them on the same machine or not, I doubt I would do that. But I wouldn't do that with Hadoop on Windows versus SQL on Windows either.
Okay, fair enough. someone is asking, is there a corresponding Linux version to XB command shell?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
I mean, there's different scripting languages and different shell environments that do come built into Linux. But the question there is, what are they going to support and how? Right now, I don't know. They haven't really said too much about that. So if you just create a new job, just blah, blah, blah. If I go steps and go insert, right now all you get is T-SQL. So you don't have the option for XP command shell or anything else, or PowerShell or any of that. They do have PowerShell on Linux now, and PowerShell Core 2, I believe, just got released.
Yep.
So I'm really hoping that by RTM time we'll have a few more options in here. Right now we don't, unfortunately. But again, those kind of details are they're slim coming from Microsoft, and I understand it. I mean, this is a 1.0 release, especially. They can't do too much to just get this thing out the door.
I can't remember with PowerShell. Is it? I think it's. They've actually fully gotten rid of SQL PS. It's just SQL Server module now they use, but it's literally so amazing.
Yeah. I mean, imagine this with the DBA Tools PowerShell pack on a Linux machine. I mean, it's power.
Yeah, exactly. Here's one for you, and I think it is fully Linux. Someone deleted an MDF file, and the database was still alive. They then took it offline. It didn't come back up online. How does the database be online after they deleted the MDF file?
That's a good question. If they started using it, if you basically just delete the file out from underneath it, well, let's try it. That's why I love having the lab. I love breaking stuff. So, I mean, basically, we are here. Let's go data 01.
Yeah, they say don't type in demos, but you're full on just, I'm going to break a database on a demo. Okay.
That's what the lab is for, man. That's why I do, I mean, I'll pull it up. That's why I have this stuff in the basement right now, because I want the ability to break stuff with impunity and not have anybody yell at me. I mean, that's the single biggest reason. So TPCC database, we're in SQL Server right here. I'm going to come over here, rm tpcc.mdf, boom, gone. Okay, there's my database. I do a database refresh. Now, nobody's accessed it yet. SQL Server doesn't know that it's not there. So if I go select star from tpcc10.dbo. And all of a sudden, IntelliSense just starts freaking out. It's grabbing what it can out of RAM.
So it's the cache.
It
As
is
someone said,
cache.
yes, someone said that in the questionnaire, so I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, but if I go update tpcc10.dbo.orders, set, let's see, I have no idea what half this stuff is. CID equals 59, where OID equals 3. That's really funny. So that updated it in the log file. That's hilarious. So yeah, same thing goes with Windows, though. Have you ever tried that?
I try not to break my databases.
Yeah, again, that's what the lab's for. I'd love to see how this stuff responds when you go to break it. I mean, you take that offline, take it back online, it's not coming back. It's hosed. I've even dropped a virtual disk underneath an active availability group before, and it didn't freak out until I started really changing data or accessing stuff that wasn't already in cache.
Right.
So we can actually look at the entire orders table. Chances are not all that is in RAM, and we're probably going to have a problem. So if I go suspect page, I cannot type today. Suspect pages. Hasn't anything yet. So yeah, no, good observation. It's one of those things, you know, at what point do you draw the line on monitoring though? Do you need to say, you know, are all my database files there right now? Go, 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 go. I don't know. I mean, you're not going to do that on Windows. Same thing happens on Linux. It's just more auditing.
You know, I love these presentations because it gets to the stage where I'm getting more questions coming in than I can actually ask you within the time frame.
That is cool.
Yeah, I will try and get all these questions over to you, but we're kind of getting up to the end and I have to finish up, so I'm going to stop the questions now here.
Yeah, just so you all know, everybody, any question that we don't get to, I will have a follow-up blog post with either answers or pointers, you know, over to the Microsoft documentation if there's any specific things in there that can address.
We do actually, on our presence, we have Kevin Klein here from Century One. I was just wondering if you'd be okay, David, if he does a short presentation on
Absolutely.
the products. Yeah, Kevin, are you there?
Oh, I am. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Would you like me to bring the slide up that I have here for it?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'll just take you off presentation now, David. Hold on.
I'm not sure I'd call it a presentation, but just a quick closing thought, everyone. And also thanks to David there. That was a fantastic presentation. And although it's been a while since I worked with Linux, it's always good to have a refresher like that. You can tell an old DOS person like myself because I'm used to all those kind of commands and, you know, all the command line stuff. So I just wanted to wrap up with a quick thought, which is if you are interested in performance tuning and monitoring and alerting products, Century One makes what are, of course, in my very biased opinion, but the best in the business. And one thing I do want to point out, if you have Linux servers that you need to watch, a SQL Server running on Linux, we already support that right now. So we are kind of the broadest in the market, and we go the deepest, yet have a very, very light overhead. We can tell you all about what's happening in SQL Server and have very dynamic monitoring and alerting. So we can give you a great deal of responsiveness that you can't get anywhere else. With that, the only other thing I want to mention is that very popular in the marketplace is our free Plan Explorer product for query tuning. And it's so free that we don't even ask for an email address. So do make sure you get that centuryone.com/planexplorer. Check that out and take a look at some of the capabilities that product has. It's a very, very nice and completely free product. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. I should probably also mention as well, I think you have a regulations compliance and the IT professional webinar coming up soon, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to be talking about mostly HIPAA-related stuff.
Cool, cool. I'd say with that and the GDPR regulations coming in, that's going to become a big part of the DBA's job. So I'm hopefully going to get a chance to watch that one myself.
Yeah, excellent stuff.
Lovely. Okay, just going to finish up here. Like David has been saying, he will very graciously send the stuff on to us, and we're definitely so thankful that he could come in and give us a presentation today. Like I said, the questions are actually still coming in. They have not stopped, so we'll try and send them all over to you, David.
Awesome. I will get those answered. I'm doing VMworld prep this week, so it may be next week, but I will definitely get those up there. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you for your questions. This is outstanding. I'm a nerd. I love this stuff.
And don't forget to check out other past virtual groups as well. Like I know the Performance Virtual Group has yourself as well, David, coming up on Thursday, isn't it?
Yep. A VM performance tuning session. Go figure.
So literally take advantage as much as you can. They do want to help you out. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and we should hopefully see you for the next webinar. Thanks again.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.